The storm raged outside like the world itself was angry. Rain slammed against the glass walls of the towering building, thunder rolling in the distance. Inside, the air was silent and heavy, every sound amplified by the vast marble lobby. At the very top of a sweeping staircase stood Mr. Donovan, a man whose wealth was matched only by his coldness. His tailored suit was flawless, his gold watch glimmering under the lobby lights. Below him stood Marcus, a humble black janitor. His uniform was faded, the knees worn thin. From years of hard work, he gripped his mop tightly, chest rising and falling with labored breaths. Water dripped from his jacket, he had clearly run through the storm to get there. His face was tired, but his eyes burned with a quiet desperation. "You're late, again." Donovan's voice was sharp, slicing through the air. It echoed against the marble walls, making the room feel like a courtroom where Marcus stood trial. Several employees, who had been lingering near the reception desk, froze mid-step. Papers stopped, shuffling. Conversations died. All eyes turned toward Marcus. I'm sorry, sir. Marcus began, his voice cracking under the weight of exhaustion and fear. But Donovan didn't let him finish. He raised one perfectly manicured hand, a gesture of complete control. "No excuses." His words dripped with disdain. "You're done here. Pack up your things and leave." The silence that followed was deafening. Even the storm outside seemed to hold its breath. Marcus's mouth opened, then closed again. His lips trembled, his eyes filled with tears he refused to let fall. He took a step forward, voice breaking. "Please, I need this job. Just give me one chance. My family." But Donovan turned his back without a word, his polished shoes clicking against the floor like a metronome of finality. His cold silhouette climbed the stairs, leaving Marcus standing small and broken beneath the weight of judgment. Whispers erupted around the room, soft but cruel. "Can you believe that?" someone murmured. "3 times late this month," another said with a smug shake of the head. "Should have known better. Boss doesn't tolerate weakness." Some employees glanced at Marcus with pity, quickly looking away before guilt settled in. Others smirked, enjoying the spectacle of another man's downfall. Marcus didn't look at any of them. He moved slowly, mechanically, gathering his cleaning supplies. His hands shook as he placed his mop and rags into the cart. His heart pounded in his chest, not just from fear of unemployment, but from something deeper. Something he couldn't say out loud. As he pushed the cart toward the door, he whispered under his breath, almost too softly to hear. "You'll never understand why." His words vanished into the cavernous lobby, swallowed by silence and indifference. The glass doors slid open with a hiss, letting in a gust of cold wind and the pounding sound of rain. Marcus stepped out into the storm. Within seconds, he was drenched, his thin jacket offering no protection. Still, he didn't stop walking. Behind him, through the glass, Donovan watched for a brief moment. Marcus's figure, small and hunched, disappeared into the darkness of the city streets. Donovan felt a rush of satisfaction, a reminder of his power. But beneath that, deep in a place he didn't often visit, something stirred. It was a fleeting unease, a question he couldn't quite form. He brushed it aside. Power was power, and Marcus had failed. In Donovan's world, failure had consequences. Inside the lobby, employees began to move again, their whispers filling the void Marcus had left. One receptionist bit her lip, clearly disturbed by what had happened, while another laughed under his breath. "Guess we'll be seeing a new janitor soon," he said. But in the far corner, a single, unnoticed tear rolled down the cheek of Mrs. Hayes, an older woman who had worked in the building for decades. She knew Marcus. She knew his story. And she knew something Donovan didn't. As Marcus trudged through the rain, his mind replayed the scene over and over. Donovan's voice, the humiliation, the stares of people who didn't know him, didn't care. Each step felt heavier than the last. He stopped under a flickering streetlight, water streaming down his face, mixing with tears. In his pocket, his fingers brushed against a small plastic bracelet. It was fragile, with tiny letters etched into it. Hope. Marcus closed his eyes, gripping it tightly. "Hold on, baby girl," he whispered to the night. "Daddy's coming." Back inside the towering glass building, Donovan poured himself a drink in his office, the storm now a distant backdrop. He tried to focus on the numbers flashing across his computer screen. On the contracts waiting for his signature. But his mind kept drifting back to Marcus, his desperate plea, his final words. "You'll never understand why." The phrase echoed in Donovan's head, refusing to be silenced. For a moment, he felt something strange and unfamiliar, doubt. He shook it off, convincing himself that it didn't matter. Marcus was just another employee, another cog in the machine. People came and went. The empire stayed strong. But outside, somewhere in the storm-soaked streets of the city, a story was unfolding. A story that would soon return to Donovan's doorstep with a truth so powerful it would shake the very foundations of his belief in control, wealth, and what it truly meant to be a man. And though Donovan didn't know it yet, this night, the night he thought he had won, was only the beginning. To the next morning, the towering glass building gleamed under the sunlight as if nothing had happened the night before. The storm had passed, but its echoes lingered in Marcus's absence. Inside, the lobby was buzzing. Employees moved quickly, dressed in crisp suits and polished shoes, ready for an important day. Donovan had called for a meeting with top investors, and everyone knew he demanded perfection. But beneath the surface, whispers were spreading like wildfire. Everyone had heard about the dramatic firing of Marcus, the quiet janitor who had worked there for years. Groups huddled in corners, murmuring behind cupped hands. "Did you hear what happened?" one young employee whispered, glancing nervously toward the staircase. Marcus was late again. Third time this month. Donovan finally snapped. Another voice chimed in, sharp and dismissive. "Some people just don't value hard work. You give them a steady job, and they still mess it up. It's pathetic." A ripple of agreement passed through the group. Others nodded, eager to side with the powerful rather than the powerless. Donovan, standing tall near the conference room doors, overheard fragments of their conversation. Instead of anger, a satisfied smirk tugged at his lips. He sipped his imported coffee, his gold watch glinting in the light. "This company runs on discipline," he said loudly. Enough for everyone to hear. His voice carried authority, each word sharp and final. "No exceptions." The employees straightened their backs, fearful of becoming the next target. The meeting began in grand style. Donovan stood before a massive glass table, surrounded by wealthy investors in designer suits. Charts and numbers lit up the screen behind him. His voice was smooth and commanding as he spoke about growth, expansion, and profits. The room buzzed with applause when he finished, his charisma leaving the investors impressed. On the surface, everything seemed perfect. But deep inside Donovan's chest, there was a small, gnawing discomfort. It had started as a whisper the night before, but now it was growing louder. Marcus had been one of the most dependable employees he had ever had. The janitor rarely spoke, but his work had always been flawless. No complaints, no mistakes, always early, always respectful. So why had he been late? These past few weeks, Donovan had assumed it was laziness, carelessness, a lack of respect for his rules. But now, a question formed in his mind that he couldn't quite shake. What if there was another reason? He tried to push the thought away as he shook hands and accepted congratulations from the investors. By the time the sun began to set, the meeting was over, and the building grew quiet again. Most employees had already gone home. Donovan walked through the empty hallways, his footsteps echoing against the marble floors. That was when he saw it, Marcus's old janitor cart, tucked into a shadowed corner near the service elevator. At first, it was just another piece of cleaning equipment, forgotten and unimportant. But then, something caught Donovan's eye. A small plastic object sat on top of a folded rag. He leaned closer, brow furrowing. It was a hospital bracelet, the kind given to patients. Its white band gleamed faintly under the dim light, and there was a single word etched into it: hope. Donovan picked it up, holding it delicately between his fingers. His mind immediately began to race. Why would Marcus have this? The image of Marcus standing in the rain replayed in his memory, the desperation in his voice, the way his shoulders had slumped under the weight of something unseen. Donovan's chest tightened. For the first time, doubt began to seep into his certainty. He slipped the bracelet back onto the cart and walked away, shaking his head as if to clear it. Logic told him to ignore it. Marcus was gone now. Whatever personal problems he had were no longer Donovan's concern. That was the rule of his world. Emotions had no place in business. Later that evening, Donovan found himself seated at an exclusive restaurant, surrounded by the City's elite. Crystal chandeliers glittered above, casting warm light over white tablecloths. Polite laughter filled the air as wealthy men and women toasted to success. Donovan smiled, raising his glass of wine, but his mind wasn't there. As the conversation swirled around him, stocks, real estate, politics, his thoughts kept drifting. Back to Marcus, to the way the man had looked when he begged for his job. The way his voice had cracked when he said, "Please, I need this job." Donovan had dismissed him like a nuisance, a problem to be erased. But now, with the bracelet in his mind, a different picture began to form. He barely heard the laughter around him. The smell of expensive food turned sour in his mouth. He could see Marcus standing in that storm again, his clothes soaked, his hands trembling. The haunted look in his eyes wasn't just fear of losing a paycheck. It was deeper, heavier. A man, carrying the weight of something unimaginable. Donovan set down his glass, suddenly feeling out of place among the glittering crowd. Across the table, a woman in a diamond necklace laughed at a joke, her carefree smile a stark contrast to the image of Marcus's tearful face. The difference between their worlds hit Donovan like a punch to the chest. Here, in this warm, luxurious room, power and privilege flowed freely. Out there, in the cold rain, Marcus had stood alone, stripped of dignity and compassion. The imbalance between them was staggering. And for the first time in Donovan's life, he began to wonder if he had been wrong. He excused himself early, stepping out into the cool night air. The city was alive with noise, but Donovan felt strangely isolated. The lights of passing cars blurred as his mind replayed Marcus's final words, "You'll never understand why." Those words echoed like a haunting refrain, refusing to be silenced. As he drove home, the bracelet's image burned in his thoughts. He told himself it didn't matter, that Marcus's problems weren't his responsibility. Yet deep down, a small voice whispered the truth. Power meant nothing without humanity. By the time Donovan reached his mansion, the unease had settled deep in his chest. He poured himself a drink and stood by the window, staring out at the city skyline. Somewhere out there, Marcus was facing a battle Donovan couldn't see. Somewhere, a story was unfolding that might change everything he believed about himself, about power, and about what it truly meant to lead. For now, Donovan tried to silence the guilt with whiskey and wealth. But the truth had already begun to take root, and it would not stay hidden forever. The following morning began like any other for Donovan, but his heart felt heavier than it had in years. He sat at his desk, staring blankly at the glowing screen in front of him, pretending to read numbers that no longer seemed important. The hospital bracelet he had found on Marcus's cart haunted him like a ghost he couldn't chase away. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Marcus standing in the rain, trembling and broken, whispering those words that now burned in Donovan's mind. "You'll never understand why." By noon, Donovan's carefully constructed world began to crack. Mrs. Hayes, one of his longest-serving employees, knocked softly on his office door. She was an older woman with kind eyes and a calm, steady presence. She had been working at the building for decades and had seen countless people come and go. Donovan barely looked up. "Yes, what is it?" His voice was curt, clipped, his usual armor of authority in place. Mrs. Hayes hesitated, wringing her hands nervously. "Sir," she said gently, I think you should know the truth about Marcus." Donovan's head snapped up, his sharp blue eyes narrowing. "The truth," she nodded, stepping closer. Her voice trembled with emotion. "Marcus wasn't late because he was careless or lazy. He wasn't disrespecting you or this company. He was fighting to keep his little girl alive." Donovan froze, the words hanging in the air like a heavy fog. "What do you mean?" His voice was quieter now, almost uncertain. Mrs. Hayes took a deep breath. "His daughter, sir. She has a rare condition. She's been in the ICU for weeks. Every morning, Marcus leaves the hospital after spending the night by her bedside. He rushes here, does his shift, and then runs straight back to her side. He barely sleeps, barely eats. That bracelet you found on his cart," she paused, tears welling in her eyes. "It's hers. Her name is Hope." The name hit Donovan like a physical blow. His throat tightened, and for the first time in years, he was speechless. Images collided in his mind. Marcus soaked in the storm, Marcus's trembling voice, the hollow look in his eyes. Suddenly, everything made sense. The lateness, the exhaustion, the desperation. No, Donovan whispered, almost to himself. I didn't know. I didn't even ask. Mrs. Hayes nodded sadly. Marcus didn't want to bother anyone with his problems. He's a proud man. He didn't want pity, just understanding. He thought if he worked hard enough, he could keep his job and pay for his daughter's treatments. She wiped at her tears. But yesterday, when you fired him, you took away the only lifeline he had left. The room fell into a thick silence. Donovan's hands trembled as he gripped the edge of his desk. For the first time, he saw himself through someone else's eyes, not as a powerful leader, but as a man who had crushed another human being without even trying to understand their pain. Without a word, Donovan stood up so abruptly that his chair toppled backward. Mrs. Hayes gasped, startled. Where are you going, sir? To fix this, Donovan said, his voice low but determined. To make it right. He didn't wait for her response. Moments later, he was in his sleek black car, the engine roaring. As he sped through the city streets, the skyscrapers blurred past as he drove, his mind a storm of guilt and urgency. For the first time, Donovan wasn't thinking about profits or deadlines. He was thinking about a man who had given everything for his daughter, and a little girl who might not live to see another day. When he arrived at the hospital, the stark white building loomed like a monument to human fragility. Donovan rushed through the sliding glass doors, his expensive shoes squeaking against the sterile tile floors. Nurses glanced at him curiously, but he didn't stop to explain. He scanned the hallways until he saw a small sign, Pediatric Intensive Care Unit. His heart pounded as he approached the window of a quiet room. There, under the harsh glow of fluorescent lights, he saw Marcus. The janitor sat slumped in a hard plastic chair beside a tiny hospital bed. His head was bowed, his hands clasped tightly around the fragile fingers of a little girl no older than 7. She was pale and small, tubes and wires surrounding her like a cruel cage. Machines beeped softly, the steady rhythm of her fragile heartbeat filling the room. Marcus's uniform was wrinkled and torn, his face drawn and hollow from exhaustion. Yet even in his brokenness, there was a fierce love radiating from him as he whispered softly to his daughter. Donovan's breath caught in his throat. He couldn't move, couldn't speak. For the first time in his life, he felt truly powerless. Marcus lifted his head slightly, sensing someone at the window. When he saw Donovan standing there, his eyes widened. He stood quickly, placing himself protectively between his daughter and the man who had humiliated him. His voice was low but edged with steel. What are you doing here? Donovan's lips parted, but no words came out. He swallowed hard, his usual confidence gone. Marcus, I didn't know. His voice cracked. I didn't know about her. Marcus's shoulders tensed. You didn't ask, he said bitterly. You just saw me as another late worker, another problem to erase. The words cut deeper than any blade. Donovan's eyes burned as he looked past Marcus at the fragile little girl lying so still in the bed. Her name is Hope, he whispered, remembering Mrs. Hayes's words. Marcus's face softened slightly, pain etched deep into his features. He nodded once, his voice trembling. She's my whole world. Everything I do is for her. I didn't want to burden anyone with my problems. I just needed this job to keep her alive. A silence fell between them, heavy and raw. Donovan finally stepped into the room, his hands shaking. Marcus, he said, his voice thick with emotion, I was wrong. I judged you without knowing your story. I let my power blind me to your humanity. Marcus stared at him, wary but listening. Donovan continued, his words tumbling out. I can't undo what I did yesterday. But I can try to make it right. I want to help. Please, let me help. Marcus's eyes filled with tears, his body trembling with exhaustion and relief. For a moment, neither man spoke. Then, as a soft beep from the machines filled the silence, Marcus nodded. Slowly, in that tiny hospital room, the balance of power shifted. Donovan, the wealthy businessman who had once stood above everyone else, now stood humbled before a man who had given everything for love. As Donovan placed a trembling hand on Marcus's shoulder, a profound truth settled in his heart. Sometimes the greatest strength comes not from wealth or authority, but from compassion. And though this moment could not erase the pain of the past, it marked the beginning of something new. a fragile, powerful hope that would change both their lives forever. For the next few days were unlike anything Donovan had experienced before. For years, his life had been defined by numbers, contracts, and power plays, a cold, calculated existence where feelings were a liability. But now, the image of hope lying in that hospital bed haunted him relentlessly. Every decision he'd made without compassion now felt like a sin he could never undo. That night, Donovan barely slept. He sat alone in his lavish penthouse, surrounded by luxury. That suddenly felt hollow and meaningless. His floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the glittering city skyline, but all he could see was Marcus's exhausted face and Hope's fragile body, connected to tubes and machines. He stared at his reflection in the glass, seeing a man he barely recognized. His tailored suit, his expensive watch, his polished shoes, all of it seemed like a mask hiding the truth of who he really was. For the first time, Donovan felt small, like a child lost in a world too big to understand. By dawn, he made a decision. This wasn't going to be just an apology, he thought, his jaw tightening with determination. I need to do something real, something that matters. At the hospital, Marcus was sitting by Hope's side, his body worn down by days without proper rest. His clothes were wrinkled, his eyes red from tears and sleepless nights. A nurse entered the room quietly, adjusting the IV drip while offering Marcus a sympathetic smile. You should get some rest, she whispered kindly. You've been here for 3 days straight. Marcus shook his head, clutching Hope's tiny hand. I can't leave her, he murmured, his voice raw. Not for a second. The nurse hesitated, then nodded softly and slipped out, leaving Marcus alone with his daughter. He bent over and kissed her forehead, whispering, Daddy's right here, baby girl. I won't let you go. Just then, the door creaked open. Marcus turned sharply, his body tense, ready to defend his daughter if needed. It was Donovan. Marcus's eyes narrowed, his expression hardening. What are you doing here again? He demanded, his voice low but filled with restrained anger. Donovan stepped inside, his usual commanding presence replaced by a quiet humility. He carried a folder in one hand and a paper bag in the other. Setting them on a chair, he met Marcus's glare with a steady gaze. I didn't come to hurt you, Marcus, Donovan said softly. I came to help. Marcus's lips curled into a bitter half-smile. Help? The last time you helped, you fired me and left me with nothing. Relentlessly, every decision he'd made without compassion now felt like a sin he could never undo. That night, Donovan barely slept. He sat alone in his lavish penthouse, surrounded by luxury. That suddenly felt hollow and meaningless. His floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the glittering city skyline, but all he could see was Marcus's exhausted face and Hope's fragile body, connected to tubes and machines. He stared at his reflection in the glass, seeing a man he barely recognized. His tailored suit, his expensive watch, his polished shoes, all of it seemed like a mask hiding the truth of who he really was. For the first time, Donovan felt small, like a child lost in a world too big to understand. By dawn, he made a decision. This wasn't going to be just an apology, he thought, his jaw tightening with determination. I need to do something real, something that matters. At the hospital, Marcus was sitting by Hope's side, his body worn down by days without proper rest. His clothes were wrinkled, his eyes red from tears and sleepless nights. A nurse entered the room quietly, adjusting the IV drip while offering Marcus a sympathetic smile. You should get some rest, she whispered kindly. You've been here for 3 days straight. Marcus shook his head, clutching Hope's tiny hand. I can't leave her, he murmured, his voice raw. Not for a second. The nurse hesitated, then nodded softly and slipped out, leaving Marcus alone with his daughter. He bent over and kissed her forehead, whispering, Daddy's right here, baby girl. I won't let you go. Just then, the door creaked open. Marcus turned sharply, his body tense, ready to defend his daughter if needed. It was Donovan. Marcus's eyes narrowed, his expression hardening. What are you doing here again? He demanded, his voice low but filled with restrained anger. Donovan stepped inside, his usual commanding presence replaced by a quiet humility. He carried a folder in one hand and a paper bag in the other. Setting them on a chair, he met Marcus's glare with a steady gaze. I didn't come to hurt you, Marcus, Donovan said softly. I came to help. Marcus's lips curled into a bitter half-smile. Help. The last time you helped, you fired me and left me with nothing. Donovan flinched at the words. He deserved them. You're right, he admitted. I was blind. I saw your lateness as a lack of discipline, not as the weight of a father fighting for his child's life. I can't undo that mistake, but maybe I can make things right now. He opened the folder, revealing a stack of documents. I've paid off all of Hope's hospital bills, he said quietly. Every cent. And this, he slid another paper toward Marcus. This is an offer for a new position at my company. Not as a janitor, something better. A job with flexible hours and full benefits. You'll never have to choose between work and your daughter again. Marcus stared at the papers, stunned. His hands trembled as he picked up the hospital bill. Receipt. Tears filled his eyes. Why would you do this? Why? After everything. Donovan's voice broke. Because I was wrong. And because no parent should have to face this kind of pain alone. He swallowed hard, his own eyes misting. When I was a boy, my little sister got sick. My father, he didn't have the money to save her. She died in a cold hospital bed while I sat outside, helpless. I swore I'd never feel that powerless again, so I built walls around myself. Money, power, control, those walls kept me safe. But they also blinded me to the pain of others. Marcus's anger faltered, replaced by quiet understanding. Donovan took a deep breath. When I saw Hope, I saw my sister. And I realized, I've been living my whole life in fear of feeling that loss again. But fear isn't strength, Marcus. Compassion is. For a long moment, the two men stood there in silence, their shared pain bridging the chasm between them. Then, softly, Marcus spoke. You didn't just save my daughter's life, Donovan. You saved mine. Over the next week, Donovan's presence at the hospital became a regular sight. He brought food for Marcus, toys for Hope, and even personally spoke with the doctors about experimental treatments that could help her condition. The hospital staff. Donovan stood quietly in the corner, his own heart swelling with relief. In that moment, he understood something profound. This wasn't just about redemption. It was about connection, about using his wealth and power to heal instead of harm. But not everyone saw Donovan's transformation as a good thing. Back at his company, whispers spread like wildfire. Board members were furious that Donovan was spending so much time and money on a single employee. Some accused him of weakness, others of recklessness. One evening, during a heated board meeting, a sharp-voiced executive named Mr. Callahan slammed his fist on the table. This is madness, Donovan. You're risking the company's reputation and resources for a janitor and his sick kid. Donovan rose to his feet, his eyes blazing with a new kind of strength. Marcus isn't just a janitor. He's a man who embodies what this company should stand for: hard work, loyalty, and family. If you can't see that, then maybe you don't belong here. The room fell silent. For the first time, Donovan wasn't just leading with power. He was leading with purpose. Back at the hospital, Marcus sat by Hope's bed, watching her sleep peacefully. Donovan entered quietly, carrying a small wrapped box. What's this? Marcus asked, raising an eyebrow. Donovan smiled softly. A gift for Hope, and for you. Marcus carefully unwrapped the box. Inside was a delicate silver bracelet engraved with the word Hope. Alongside it was a key. Marcus frowned, confused. A key? Donovan's smile widened. To your new home. It's closer to the hospital and fully paid for. No more cramped apartment. No more struggling. Marcus's hands shook as he stared at the key. Donovan, I don't know what to say. Say nothing, Donovan replied gently. Just promise me you'll never stop fighting for her. And, when she's well enough, bring her by my office. I want her to see what real strength looks like. Marcus's voice broke as he whispered, thank you. Donovan placed a hand on Marcus's shoulder, his grip firm but warm. No, Marcus, thank you for teaching me what it truly means to live. As the chapter closed, Hope stirred in her sleep, her small hand clutching the bracelet with her name on it. For the first time in years, Donovan felt something he thought he'd lost forever. A sense of purpose, a chance for redemption, and a fragile, beautiful hope.